we're going to jump right into it. So over the past few weeks, the mainstream media has been releasing stories about UFOs and a little bit into what certain branches of the government have known about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. So why is this soft disclosure happening now? And is the cabal being forced into it, or is this part of their plan? Could you kind of, Brad, we'll start with you. I mean, what are you making of finally the mainstream media has broken their silence about what, you know, guys like you and Ryan have been talking about for a long ass time?
Yeah. And the fact that this is the very first time that the New York Times has put UFO research in a non-satirical way in their newspaper should be somewhat telling. That being that while it's great that we're starting to get attention, and CNN had it in rotation on their fake news show for a while, I have to be a little skeptical that they're telling us what's really going on. And by the way, if you look deeper into the article and kind of read between the lines, they don't mention ETs at all. They don't mention exotic craft. It's just we've been watching, and then what we watch is kind of fake. And then I have to take it from John Lear, who analyzed it and knows how these kind of videos are created. And he said it's the jargon that they use, they wouldn't have talked that way. But more importantly, they have the sound of air rushing into the sealed face mask. And he said, absolutely no way would that have picked up. So John Lear said straight up that the video that was used was totally faked. And then you have other people like Stephen Greer, who also calls it fake flag disclosure. George Knapp was a little bit skeptical, and some other UFO researchers who have said that this just seems really kind of odd that it would come out right now with all this fanfare without even really telling us anything about what it is. It was just speculation of a couple pilots who saw something fuzzy on their radar screen.
Ryan, what do you think it's happening right now? And, you know, what are the motivations behind it?
Well, first of all, let's address what a UFO is. It's an unidentified flying object. So it's really difficult logically to dispute that UFOs exist, because I see UFOs all the time. That just doesn't mean that they're alien spacecraft. And unfortunately, we have these tic-tac arguments, these polarized debates about whether or not a UFO exists or it doesn't exist. And one part of the community says they exist and they're aliens, they're Pleiadian ships. And the other side says, no, UFOs don't exist. There's no such thing as a UFO. And I think the truth resides somewhere in the middle of that. I think when we see things that are loosely considered disclosure, it's a form of disinformation. And I'm not necessarily saying who's behind that disinfo and what kind of disinfo it is. It just seems like disinformation. It seems like a psyop. I think it's taking advantage of people's genuine interest in the subject. And also on the subject of disclosure, it always bothered me, even when I considered myself partly a part of that community growing up, because I wanted some type of disclosure. I thought the government was covering up extraterrestrials and UFOs before I really knew what any of that meant or could mean. It's that we think the government's lied to us. We think these agencies have lied to us. And yet we still turn to authority that we wholly believe has lied to us, to then tell us the truth. That seems a little bit like misplaced judgment to me. I personally believe that when we look at something called disclosure, we've had disclosure. It's not something that's been dished out by a government official, somebody in a suit, somebody in some agency. My personal view, and I researched this for one of my books called The Persistent Illusion on my show, The Secret Teachings. I just did a huge show on this Saturday live, which maybe it's just my imagination or I'm paranoid, but both of the shows that I put on YouTube, my computer froze and crashed when I tried to put up these images. I showed images from NASA and from JPL. These are in the JPL NASA archives. They are images that show clearly what we might call an anomaly. An anomaly is something that is rare to be seen, but when you start seeing the same anomaly over and over again, it's not an anomaly, it's a pattern. And NASA has photographs, hundreds of photographs in their archives that are not disputed. and they're not promoted as being anything other than just a photograph of space. We see objects near Mars, objects near Saturn, objects near the sun, objects near the moon, objects near Earth. And all of these objects are, once again, if you were to analyze, they would be considered anomalies, meaning that they're not explained as a satellite or as something that NASA has done. They're just kind of dismissed. And I think that's the kind of evidence that already exists. It's available to anybody with an internet connection, and yet it's ignored for these arguments and for these discussions of jelly donuts on Mars, Bigfoot on Mars, and that discredits the community a whole lot. Yeah. I think that's my perspective, at least.
Yeah, you make a really valid point, and it brings up the question then, are a lot of these so-called UFO sightings actually, military driven? I mean, do they have technologies we don't realize, and then, they're up to some stuff, and that's what we're seeing? It's not so much people that are coming from, elsewhere in the galaxy, but, it's coming right from here on Earth.
And the military would want the story of extraterrestrial life to be promoted in order to cover up some of the things that they've been doing for decades, for generations. I mean, the SR-71 Blackbird came from Area 51. That was a Cold War spy plane that was, at the time when it was witnessed, was brushed off as a UFO sighting to get the public to focus on aliens when it was actually a government craft. But there's obviously, when you make those types of statements, we get that extreme argument again. People will say to me, oh, then you don't believe in aliens. Well, I don't think it has anything to do with extraterrestrials. We're just discussing unidentified flying objects. That could mean Superman, that could mean a bird, that could mean exotic military craft, which could have been reverse engineered for all I know. But it's not something. I don't think we should focus on these extreme polar arguments. It really discredits, it discredits objectivity, which is how we need to approach this subject, and any subject for that matter.
Brad, Linda Moulton Howe brought up this idea that she thinks that the worst case scenario is an end game for the cabal is to create an alien, a false flag alien sighting. Can you kind of get into that? Why do you think she meant that would be a pretty bad deal for us?
I'm glad you brought that up, Clint, because this is what I think it's all about. It all started with Carol Rosen, who was the spokesperson of Werner von Braun, one of the paperclip Nazis who came over here and helped start up NASA. And he always went on and on about those so-called threatening cards. One of them was terrorism. We've seen that played out, and how these cards would be used by the military to pave the way for building space-based weapons. And I think we're seeing that now too. Von Braun's last card was the so-called extraterrestrial enemy card. Carol Rosen said, quote, "One of the funniest one of all was what he called aliens extraterrestrial. That would be the final scare." And over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. "And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it is a lie." So I believe there are no coincidences here, guys. I think we're being set up for something. We've all known about Project Bluebeam, which is a faked ET invasion of Earth. And by the way, just yesterday, the CIA, just out of the blue, post some UFO craft from the 1950s. So they're seeding us. And then you get this guy, Tom DeLonge from Blink 182 and his To the Stars Academy. Listen to this quote from Tom DeLonge, who is saying that there will be some kind of significant disclosure announcement 4 weeks before the New York Times article. And he said, "The entire UFO phenomenon is about multiple gods that fight among themselves, and by design, factionalize mankind into different religions to step back and let us fight each other. So it has things that it wants to accomplish, and we don't notice them because we're too involved fighting each other." Well, I don't really know what to make of Tom DeLonge yet, but if he's working with these contractors and they're using him as a spokesman to basically bring this stuff out, I think I'm going to have to go along with David Icke's observation in all this when he said, "Aliens are a myth? ? Don't be daft. They are manipulating our world." and they're manipulating this disclosure. And I think we're getting set up for something like Linda Moulton Howe pointed out, some kind of Project Bluebeam fake UFO mass sighting.
Now, I'll tell you something about that. That's an interesting point, and to segue into this so-called UFO that was seen in Southern California just a few days ago. Did you all see this?
We saw it in Arizona.
Yep, all the way to Arizona, exactly. Now, the thing about it is, if we lack perspective, we might be able to somehow write this off as a SpaceX rocket because some people tweeted about it. Well, let's say that it was a SpaceX rocket. Let's just say that it was a SpaceX rocket. I've got photographs, and they're not strictly mine. They're mainstream media. If you look at all the articles, I've just combined them over the years. I've got mainstream media photographs, Associated Press, and so many others. There was the same object spotted over San Francisco all the way down to Los Angeles in 2015. It was spotted in Miami in 2015. It was spotted in China in 2010. It was spotted in Russia this year, just a few days ago. And it was spotted the thing about the Chinese one, this is the most unbelievable one. If you go to my website, or if you just type this in 2010 Chinese UFO, it's pretty prominent. You should be able to find it. The Chinese UFO that went over China shut down airports. The military was put on high alert. I wouldn't think that the military would be put on high alert if they knew that a rocket was being launched. I wouldn't think that airports would be shut down if a rocket was being launched. And yet it's exactly the same as the image that we saw in California to Arizona. The other thing that happened while the attention, I remember being in studio. I was doing a radio show that morning when that story about the Chinese UFO came out. And there were other photographs in China that didn't look anything like the object that was flying over the countryside. These objects were literally translucent in the sky above China. And I don't like to use the word because it's associated with blue beam, and I think that there's a different meaning there, but there was literally a blue beam of light projected from the ground, creating these large objects in the sky, very clearly holographic in nature. And not too long after that, it came out that there were some small companies that had developed holographic technology. Even I forget his last name, but Simon from American Idol, he invested in one of these big companies. They don't even need to use mechanical means to create holograms. They're able to excite the particles in the air to create a holographic image without any machine. So that technology is so advanced just in the private sector, just like tiny little companies. Imagine what the military has. Imagine what some university students have developed. So when we looked at those photographs in China, it's very clear, using that as a reference point to what just happened in Southern California, that was not a SpaceX rocket. That was not a rocket of any kind that I don't think anybody's ever seen, because it wasn't a rocket. It was a UFO. It doesn't have to be an alien spacecraft, probably some type of military experiment. But nevertheless, on the subject of Linda Moulton Howe, what Brad was just saying, there definitely is a movement toward creating some type of public awareness of these types of events, and then exploiting that public awareness, like I mentioned earlier, taking advantage of people's genuine interest in the subject to promote what might be, what Wernher von Braun had supposedly said, an alien invasion. But it's not an alien invasion. It's all holographic. It's fake. It's not real.
Well, the thing with me is, if you look at one of the photos, and we'll post it here, there are 3 other individual lights with a small green in the sky, and what it reminded me of was the Norway-spiral. So when you had that spiral go through, there was like a green mist that was in the sky. Same here, and there were 3 other lights outside of that rocket that were like surrounding that green piece. It's one
and there was another spiral in Australia.
Yeah,
did you see the Australia? Mm-hmm. So again, one is an anomaly. 2 is a coincidence. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on. That's a pattern.
So Brad, do you think then is this leading towards? I mean, are the aliens the new Islamic terrorists of the future? I mean, is this the new setup? You know, we can't play this Islamic terrorist thing jihad forever. It's here we go. Yeah, intergalactic jihad. Is that what we're leading towards? Is this a possibility?
And a lot of the so-called leading scientists, like deGrasse or Stephen Hawking warned that, oh, we don't want to encounter aliens. It would be real bad for humanity. Look, if they wanted to wipe us out or take over this planet, they had thousands of years to do so, and especially in the last few decades when we were building up to having technology, maybe to counter them. But just back to the lights, what Brian brought up, and I witnessed the one here in California 2.5 years ago. It was amazing. I thought it was right over my apartment basically, and it turned out to be hundreds of miles away. And that one also was visible all the way to Texas. The blue lights of California. So once again, the blue color. What I think is going on here is we're being set up for this, that when the cabal it has their back against the wall, and Donald Trump just tweeted something about the deep state today, and the mainstream media is like scratching their head. Do you really think there's a secret government? Yeah, isn't it your job to figure that out, you dumbos? But you were being set up here for something. And the fact that they blamed it now on SpaceX, and I was amazed at how many people just dismissed it. Mm-hmm. Like, SpaceX has this kind of technology. Last I saw, all their rockets, they just look like those Trident missiles. So this is, once again, some kind of exotic energy weapon, I believe, or something. Maybe it's to scare an enemy, just like when the Norway-spiral occurred a couple years ago. It occurred at the same time that Obama was flying to Oslo, Norway, to get his Nobel Peace Prize, and he saw it out the window. Why were they doing that? To tell him, you don't bring up aliens, or this Norway spiral is going to hit your plane on the way back. And
they claimed that was a missile spiraling out of control. If you ever look at a missile spiral out of control, it does 1 or 2 rotations and then it explodes.
The Norway, not with the light signature like that. That was incredible.
No. And then it opened up into what looked like a black hole with a blue rim on the outside.
Yeah.
No rocket, no missile going out of control is going to create that type of uniformity like that. If you've seen the Norway spiral, it's incredible. And again, like Richie said, there's another one in Australia just a few years ago as well. So we're seeing this as a pattern in different countries, sometimes at the same time, because there was just another one of these filmed in Western Russia a few days ago. SpaceX, I don't think, is launching from Russia, are they?
That's weird. No.
Ryan,
there's another one in Miami just a month after the California blue lights as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ryan, with SpaceX being used as a scapegoat, what does that say about Elon Musk's involvement in all this?
I don't know much about Elon Musk. The only thing I would say is that I lived in Orlando. I actually lived all in Central Florida. I used to go to see rocket launches and space shuttle launches at NASA, Cape Canaveral. Never have I ever seen a rocket that looked anything like that. There is an article from the USA Today. You can type in USA Today rocket launches 2017, and they will show you a picture of every single rocket launch this year. Different environmental conditions, day and night. None of them look even remotely close to what we saw in China, what we saw in Russia, what we saw in Australia, Norway, Miami, San Francisco, etc. I don't know much more about Elon Musk. Elon Musk to me is just like almost like a Steve Jobs, kind of like this iconic hero to so many people that love technology. They love space travel. They love the concept of advancing and progressing forward. Elon Musk doesn't really register with me in any way. I don't really know much more.
Brad, what about you? Do you think does this implicate, if this is a lie, does this implicate Elon Musk as part of this, or is he kind of forced into it? And of course, you don't know for sure, but putting the pieces together, what do you think?
Sure. Well, I live up here in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, and a lot of these guys, the Google guys, the Elon Musk has a home here, that a lot of the tech billionaires are my neighbors. Even Zuckerberg has a house here in San Francisco. Look, they've been talked to. They've been given that, they've had that discussion with CIA, some of the alphabet agencies said, look, you're either going to go along with us or we're going to take over your platform. And just keep in mind, when Google started, their motto was, don't do anything evil. and they've taken that out. And you know, Schmidt just resigned, their CEO.
Yeah.
Apparently he's got a home near the Playboy Mansion, and we know the Playboy Mansion has all these underground tunnels, presumably one of them leading to Mr. Schmidt's home. So he's on the run now too, it would seem, and left his very prestigious position. So I think these guys have been given a talking to, and I don't think Elon Musk could achieve what he has with SpaceX if he wasn't going along with the program. So he went along with the program, and he said something like he didn't deny that missile launch wasn't SpaceX, but he said something like, "Isn't it amazing how people quickly attribute this kind of thing to aliens?" And you know what else happened right around the time of that light show was this alien object that was hurtling through outer space, and all of a sudden this interstellar object was first appeared to be maybe a UFO cloaking as this oblong shaped meteorite, and the object might have had an organic coat to mask its true appearance. It was called Oumuamua, and of course that just came and went. But the point is that it seemed like they were using it maybe as a setup. Maybe they're getting ready for a blue beam kind of thing, but it wasn't quite right. So that one passed, and cue up the next scenario. Maybe this superstorm that's hitting the East Coast right now is very suspicious. When North Dakota is the coldest place on planet Earth, colder than the North Pole or Siberia, and now you've got this massive storm moving up, I'm worried something might happen, some kind of like EMP attack, false flag, knock the power out, really, bring those people to their knees out east. So it's fortunate we're in the nice warmy climates.
Absolutely, and you know, this is going to lead perfectly into our next topic. And you know, I'm excited to see how this call it what disclosure, whatever you want to call it, but just this mainstream media revealing a little bit more, and it will be interesting to see as time goes on in terms of the the extraterrestrial question, to see how it unfolds. And I think the next couple months will tell. I mean, we're living in the most interesting time we've ever lived in. In fact, and it almost seems like everything's setting up for pretty much 2018 to be like the most awesome year ever in terms of just like happening. So we'll keep up to date on it.